I'm very happy to be a part of this symposium. And as you've mentioned already, it is really the to take care of the birds that are around us during this time where kite string injuries are going to happen. We can expect them, and it's good to be ready to face such issues. Um, so this is the first part. I'm going to be delivering a lecture on how to identify an emergency in a bird, what you can do at that moment with respect to first aid, and how you can, sort of make sure that this bird has a chance of survival. And I think the second part will be talking about anesthesia and surgery tomorrow. So, with that being said, I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to first speak about how to handle these patients. So, we want to ethically handle these birds. These birds are going to feel scared. They are always going to act out of fear because they consider themselves the prey, and they're going to see us as predators. When we try to restrain or hold these birds, they're going to release all the adrenaline they have and they're going to fight it, and they're not going to like being held. And sometimes you doing the wrong thing can lead to their death. So, being aware of how to approach these species is very important to maximize their survival chance. So, when you are calm at handling the bird is going to understand that and feel your confidence, and the struggle is going to come down. So it is very different. The way to handle a bird is very different than handling any other dog or cat. Understanding their stress behavior, understanding their response to stress is very important. You want to plan on how to approach a bird that is already scared. You want to plan and keep everything around you, every material that you would need for the checkup. And understanding their anatomy is also important. You want to know where you can apply pressure on the body and where you cannot. Um, Certain handling techniques might help. Each species of bird is different. It's not like you're going to see only a parrot, or it's not like you're going to see only a kite. Understanding that you want to limit the handling time to as little time as possible is important. The more you handle the animal, the more it's going to get stressed, the more that could lead to respiratory compromise or delayed healing.
देखी सब्जी ਤਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਬਲੀ
So
ਵੈਸੇ ਘੱਟ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਮਤਲਬ ਠੀਕ 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 ਹੈ
I think someone's mic is on. So we also want to make sure that you're going to be aware of safety of the people around you as yourself when you handle birds. Some birds can be big and they can also bite you really hard, or their claws and talons are going to hurt you, or sometimes wings can flap and hit someone's face. So always take some time to prepare everything that you would need for that particular exam and then head into it. So there are a couple of principles. I've spoken about these. I'm just going to highlight them again. Always have a specific room where you're going to see exotic animals. You want to make sure that this room is escape proof. You don't want to hunt around a flying bird everywhere. You want to make sure that the room doesn't have any open windows or places where a bird can get trapped. Dimming the lights really helps. So birds kind of suddenly get shocked that they can't see, and that is the best time to approach them and capture them if you're unable to catch a flying bird or a bird that has come out. If you have handled a predator species, it's good to wash hands off so you don't have any scent on you. Prepare everything, as I mentioned, like if you need dressing material, if you need a box, if you need towels, keep everything ready. Make sure that there's not much noise, and once you start handling the animal, it is important that you maintain the normal posture of the bird. You don't want to invert the bird or put the bird in a position where it's not going to be comfortable. That's going to make the bird struggle more. And always remember, don't handle more for more time than you actually need. Like if you finished doing what you need to do, but someone is still waiting to get the cage ready, or someone is waiting to get that station ready, we're going to put the bird, you holding the bird for that extra time is also going to be very stressful. So some things that you need to remember or understand is early recognition of stress in a bird. always watch what is happening. Suppose a bird is breathing with its mouth open. As you can see in this video here, this is a bird that is in severe respiratory distress. You can see that it's panting. You can see how its entire body is lifting up and down, and this bird is not able to stand. This is a bird that you don't want to handle. The least amount of handling is going to help that bird. Look for any freezing movements or escaping attempts. Most birds will do that. Look for excessive vocalization once you handle. Some birds are expected to be really loud when you handle them, and as long as you understand the difference between a struggling bird, it is good. And another thing you need to remember is if you're approaching a bird that has not been handled at all and you notice that the wings are trembling a lot, try to dim the lights, try to do everything else that you can to calm the bird and quickly restrain the bird. So again, just brushing through quick handling goals for a bird is you don't want their wings to be flapping around. It is quite dangerous because the bird can fracture its wings by doing so or injure someone if it's a big bird. When you handle the bird, it is important that you don't depress or don't sort of put a lot of pressure on the keel bone because birds don't have diaphragms. So when they breathe, they lift their entire body up. They expand their entire cavities and pull all the air in. And if you're compressing that, it is going to limit the amount of air that is entering the body. And the longer you hold it like that, there is a good chance that you might cause hypoxia. So you also want to make sure that the room is not very cold, or you've not trapped the bird so much that it's become so hot. Avoid over restraining. Suppose you're worried about letting the bird go loose, or if you're worried about the bird going to bite you and you're just holding the bird really tight, that is going to be harmful as well. There are certain parts of the bird that you can hold, and this will certainly prevent any bites. And you just focus on those anatomical landmarks, and you should be good. In larger birds, capture myopathy can occur where they have strained a lot and you have caused some sort of muscle damage. So here are some images of how to handle some species of birds. So over here, you can see how this person is holding the African gray parrot. We are using a towel here. The hand is held around the head. There is a good grip over the head and the neck. The other hand is sort of just covering the entire bird to make sure that the feathers cannot flap. This is a really comfortable way to hold a bird. You are going to prevent any rapid movement that can lead to injury to the bird. At the same time, you're preventing any bites from that sharp beak. So you need to remember that birds actually have complete tracheal rings. Strangling them is almost impossible. Of course, you can put a lot of pressure on the neck, and that can be bad. But to a large extent, if you've restrained the head this way, holding both the jaws, and sometimes you might want to put your finger under the jaw too, it's not going to suffocate the bird. Here is the middle picture is a bird where there is an abdominal distension. And the person holding the bird has held, it's a small bird, so you can actually hold the head in between your two fingers and use the rest of your fingers to prevent the wings from flapping. And if you notice, there is absolutely no grip around the abdomen. This is going to allow the bird to breathe, and this bird is already struggling to breathe because birds actually have air sacs anatomically. So there's the lungs and the air sacs are distributed all over the body. And this is where you'll find the abdominal and the caudal thoracic air sacs. And this space is already sort of suffocated by this swelling. You don't want to put more pressure there, causing more difficulty. And lastly, this is a smaller bird again. You can see how the thumb and the index finger are being used to hold the head in place, while the other fingers cover the wings. And this bird is anatomically allowed to perch. If you look at all the three images, the birds are being kept upright and not inverted or tilted in any way. And this is the best way that the bird can breathe. And the bird is going to be a lot more comfortable this way. So there are a couple of methods of handling. As when we're speaking about, injuries that are affected, I mean, with kite string, I'm sure not all of these will apply because most times you're going to have a really traumatized bird with an open wound, and it's not going to be possible for you to use most of these techniques. But just well trained, you can do a minimal contact technique, or the bird is just going to walk around, come to you, sit on your hand, and you can do a hand perch technique. Suppose the bird is really ill, you want to just look at it in a box or in whatever container it has come in without handling it at all until you can stabilize the bird and just understand what's happening. If you look at the two-handed support, you use one hand to hold the head and the other hand to hold the body. That is a good way. That is without a towel. And lastly, we do a towel assisted, which is considered a little stressful for the bird. Most birds are very scared of things falling on them, but it is the best way when a bird is aggressive or flapping too much. This is going to protect the bird from any sort of trauma. And you can use this towel held technique for palpation of the body, the wings. You can manipulate the towel around and check different parts of the body, and that's going to help you safely look at a bird and examine it. So, when you actually, just a second. Yeah, I think someone is annotating on the slide. Okay, so these are just different techniques on how you should actually check different. So you want to check different parts, and this is how you actually hold the birds in those parts. Okay, so if you just want to check the weight, it's always good to have a box in which you place a perch or the perch directly on a weighing scale. Birds always like to stand on something rather than flat grounds. So if you use a towel, then you can place the bird inside the box over the weighing machine. If you want to do a wing exam, then you actually restrain the bird, hold the head, place the bird as close to you as possible, and then extend one wing at a time and look at what is happening. Look at the wings, look at the feathers, look at the bones, see if there's a fracture. And this is for fractures that you can't see if there's no open wound. And if you want to do a head and beak exam, then you have to, again, as I explained, hold the bird's head, and then you can use your fingers to move the beak around. And again, remember not to put too much pressure and rotate the head from side to side to look at different parts of the head. As for the body, you hold the bird similarly. Make sure that the wings are secure, otherwise, it's going to flap around and you can palpate gently. Always remember these birds are really small, they have delicate tissues, you don't want to apply too much pressure. And lastly, when you're doing a leg exam or a clavicle exam, it's good to have another person hold the bird. Support the bird's body while you can, extend or flex the legs, look at the vent. And sometimes, if you can't look at the vent, you might want to just use a wet cotton swab to put the feathers down, and then you'll be able to see the vent or the cloaca. So, here is on the left, you can see how we are actually holding the bird. This is a very large bird. Um, On the left is a scarlet macaw. It's this macaw was particularly aggressive, and if you can see, we're using a thick towel. We have made a double layer of it. You can see the handlers also holding the legs because this bird is going to be able to kick and get out of it and bite you and probably even fracture your fingers. Here is a video of how we do oral exam. We're actually using a tool that is a speculum, like it's like a mouth gag. So it has a narrow part and a thick part. You can insert. I'll just play it again. We can insert it into the mouth and just open the beak without getting bitten. As you can see, this bird has severe inflammation inside the oral mucosa. And on the right side, I have an image of how we do a wing exam. As I explained, sometimes we have two people doing it. One person who's just restraining the bird, and the other vet or the doctor who's just going to open the wings and check if everything's okay. In a smaller bird, a single person can do all of it. So, quickly speaking about triage, what do you want to do if you're in this emergency clinic and you have birds coming with wing injuries or leg injuries and they look really bad? So you want to quickly assess how bad the bird is. So you want to quickly see if this bird is ready to be examined or needs to be stabilized before examining. Most times, what you can do is place a box which has some ventilation on the weighing scale and have the bird transferred to the box immediately. And this has to be a clear box. I'll show you a picture of this in the next slide. So once you get the weight, Sometimes you can even do the weight later if you don't have anything accessible, but just do a visual exam. If there is any active bleeding, you want to arrest it immediately. If there is any respiratory distress, you want to address that immediately. And if you have a bird that is already collapsed, then you want to quickly get on to doing CPR. I will speak about that in the coming slides. And if you feel like the bird does have an open wound or does have a fractured bone, you might want to give an analgesic, an injection before you do anything, or just sedate the bird. So if you have a bird that's coming like this, there is severe respiratory distress, the bird is collapsed. I don't think I want to hold this bird. I will probably kill it by just holding it. So such a bird you want to place in a box where you can oxygenate or even nebulize. I will be speaking about that next. So if you look at the bird in this picture, I don't think I want to touch this bird for too long. It is already in a clear box. I have gotten the weight. In the same box, I am able to nebulize the bird and oxygenate the bird. This bird is very fluffed up, it's unable to stand, and there's open mouth breathing. So always try to examine in its box or a cage or whatever the bird is come in. Look for obvious signs of an emergency. As I said, if there is collapse, if there is severe respiratory distress, work on that. If there are seizures, because sometimes you're going to have birds that have not eaten for a while and just found somewhere, so there could be hypoglycemic seizures also. So if there are seizures, address that, give a shot of diazepam, and then figure out what you want to do. If respiratory distress is seen, then dim the lighting, oxygenate, nebulize. I will probably talk about this in the coming slides about what drugs you can use to nebulize, and make sure it's warm. Most times these birds are going to come hypothermic. You want to use a heating mat or warm gloves covered in newspaper or probably cloth, and just warm the bird up. Once stable, then you can safely proceed and handle. But until then, it's not worth putting your hands in and trying to agitate the bird more. So, what assessment points can we look at when we actually have a bird that is just, in front of you? You have not touched the bird yet, but what can you do? You can still continue looking, and you're going to get a lot of information by just looking at this bird that is in this plastic box. So, look at how the feathers are. Are they fluffed? Can you see any broken feathers because of, trauma falling? Is there any blood stuck on these feathers? Look at the eyes, see if there's any swelling. Look at the cornea, see if they're bright or cloudy. Again, look at the respiration. There are respiratory patterns that you can recognize by just looking at the bird. See if there is any open mouth breathing. See if there is any nasal discharge. See if you can see blood coming out of the nostrils or the oral cavity. If there is tail bobbing, you know that the bird is struggling to breathe and putting all of its effort into getting some air in. See how the color of the feet look. Are they looking bluish? That means the bird could be cyanotic because of hypoxia. Next, look at obvious signs of trauma. See if you can find a broken wing. Are there any lacerations, bones sticking out? Is the bird able to stand? Last, you also want to look at how the bird is standing. Stance is very, very important. If you give the bird a perch, or if there is a perch in that, is the bird able to perch? Is it able to stand up, or is it sitting on its hocks with, are the toes clenched? All of this is going to give you a lot of information on the state of the bird. If you can find any feces or stool in the box that the bird is come in, observe that also. Look for any feces stuck on the tail of the bird. That could give you information that the bird was on the ground for a while or in the same spot where, its poop was getting stuck on its feathers. Are you seeing any blood in the stool? It could indicate some internal bleeding. The stool color for different species is different. I mean, if I have to talk about it, it'll take a really long time. But you want to look at if it's black, if there's digested blood in it, and look at the color of urates. Many times when these birds are found, they might have concurrent diseases going on because of reduced, immunity, and that could change the color of the urates. Look for any obvious vomiting or regurgitation. You want to prevent aspiration, and look at the mentation of your bird. Is it alert? Is it dull? Is it comatose? Are the eyes fixed? All of these are going to let you know what you need to do next. Now, what can you do once you've actually stabilized the bird? Suppose you have if there were seizures, you've given diazepam. Suppose there was respiratory distress, you've nebulized, given oxygen, the bird is doing much better. Now, what can you do? So, first of all, handle the bird very gently, very carefully. Uh, do a quick exam. All of these are just to know everything that is happening with the bird. You should be able to do all of this within 5 to 10 minutes. Use a speculum or just use a earbud and open the mouth, look inside, look at the glottis and the choana, look how the color is, see if you can find any papillae, see if you can find any spots. If you need to do a cytology quickly, just take a sample. Look at the nares and the eyes. Look for swelling, discharge, any sort of asymmetry, wounds. Sometimes when they fall, they could break their beaks. Look for now, after this, you can just quickly look at the spine, look at the wings, look at the legs for breaks. For auscultation, it is important you do this because you get to know a lot. You can place your stethoscope on the back of the bird to listen to the lungs, on the sides of the chest to listen to the heart. You won't be able to listen to the heart if you put the stethoscope on the bottom at the keel bone because the heart is really well protected by the sternum. And listen to the abdomen when you want to see if there's anything happening with the air sacs. Look at the bird's wings. Is one wing drooping or both wings drooping? Because that is going to give you additional information. Look at the vent and the abdomen. You want to make sure that the abdomen is supposed to be convex and not concave. If there is a concavity to the abdomen, that probably means that there is ascites or internal bleeding, or there's a mass inside. Or look for skin discoloration also. Look for the BCS. We usually check the BCS for birds by palpating the keel bone, and looking at the symmetry of the breast muscle, and that's going to let you know if the bird has been starving for a while, or if there is muscle wasting. Here are just some videos of how we actually you know do a cloacal swab, and this is how we actually do, just a second, sorry, how we do an oral swab. You can see how we're handling the bird. It's just a very quick swab just to know what is happening inside the mouth. We get a lot of information by quick cytology. I really don't know how these things keep getting annotated. Just give me a second. Okay. Okay, so I've spoken about examining these birds, but sometimes you don't have enough time to do all of this. And if you have a crashing bird, what do you do? It's very similar to dog and cat, emergency protocols, except that anatomical differences must be remembered. So you focus on similar things. Suppose you have a bird that's come with an injury, but the bird is starting to collapse, probably because of blood loss, probably because it has aspirated something. You don't know. So start similarly as you would with a dog or cat that has come crashing. So airways, check once you have patent airways, then you start breathing, make sure the circulation is good. And lastly, what drugs are you going to give to manipulate all of these systems? So when you want to look at airways and breathing, we've already spoken a little bit about respiratory distress. As I said, immediately put it in an oxygen chamber. But what if the bird is not breathing at all and has become cyanotic? If you can intubate, it is the best thing you can do. So we always use uncuffed tubes because birds have complete tracheal rings. You have an assist open the beak for you from behind the bird, and you can then use the right size tube, pull the tongue or depress the tongue, and then look for the opening of the glottis. The glottis is usually there right behind the tongue. And then you put a lubricated endotracheal tube inside and connect it to your rebreathing bag. Most birds, you would probably need, small birds that you see, you'll need a 1 to 4 number ET tube, and very large birds, you might even need anything above 6 and can go up to 10 or 11. But if intubation is not possible, as you can see the picture below, you can use a very tight fitting mask that covers the entire beak and the nares. Sometimes you can even push a mask all the way till the neck of the bird because of their weird anatomy. You can then stuff in towels or anything to make it leak proof. Over here, we're just using, sorry, over here, we're just using a silicone thing. But you can also use latex gloves and just make small holes through which the beak of the bird can go in. And we would recommend, once it is tight enough, you immediately start, pushing in air with a rebreathing bag. A 500 ml bag is what we would use, but you always have to look at the size of the bird and see how much air you want to push in. And another thing, how do you, in dogs and cats, you're going to get the ET tube in and you're just going to do the compressions. You see the chest elevate. Sometimes that's not possible in birds. How do you breathe for the bird? So you can always place the bird on its sternum, lift its wings and move the wings up and down. And this is going to create that pressure that's going to use drugs if you think nothing's working. Doxapram can be used. Use 1 times everything must times these birds will come with open wounds and that would need antibiotics, but always be very responsible and try and culture samples before you start using them. So it is very important that you sedate or start an analgesic in these birds that come in with whenever possible. If a bird is not in severe respiratory distress, actually sometimes even in severe respiratory distress, just sedating the bird might help the bird breathe better, or it will help you put in an ET tube and help the bird breathe better. Sedation in healthy birds is relatively very safe, and in unhealthy birds or birds that come in with trauma, it's going to help them reduce the amount of adrenaline that's released in the body and reduce their shock responses. It's also going to give you time to handle the bird well without causing any more trouble. So, the most safest combination that works in almost every species is using midazolam and butorphanol together as a mixed you can just use both at 1 mg per kg and give it intramuscularly into the breast muscle. You can use midazolam intranasally if you cannot give it intramuscularly. You can just go ahead and amp up the dose of midazolam up to 7 mg per kg. And once you give this, give it 5 minutes, place the bird in a quiet oxygen chamber, and the bird is going to go down and get more relaxed, and then you can handle the bird. If you're doing additional procedures that is going to require more sedation, you can then use isoflurane as an anesthetic, but be really careful because this can lead to severe hypotension or respiratory arrest. Always be careful, monitor, and see how the heart is doing, see how the perfusion is. It is important to use analgesics every time you have a bird that comes in with trauma or an emergency. Birds seem to tolerate meloxicam really well without seeing the side effects that we usually see with dogs and cats. So use meloxicam at 0.5 to 1 mg per kg. Ideally, stick to the lower side because you don't know what the perfusion is, and you don't know how the kidneys are doing. You can use this subcutaneously, intramuscularly, or intravenously. Butorphanol also acts as an analgesic, but along with other NSAIDs. Buprenorphine seems to cause a longer amount of sedation, so you want to be prepared for that. Gabapentin is really good when it comes to birds that are showing neuropathic pain related to orthopedic injuries, spinal traumas, leg trauma, trauma. It's going to help a lot, but you recommend using meloxicam. So it can give you the dose of meloxicam that you need and also make the bird a lot more calmer. You an exam, there is not much you can do for it immediately with respect to therapy, but at least you know what you're looking at. So if your bird has seizures, first address the seizures, go ahead and give them emergency medication, diazepam, midazolam, and then, oxygenate. But once you've done that, you want to correct what is happening and why the seizures are happening. Most times, it can be because of lower calcium levels. it can be because of heavy metal poisoning, which can be seen in raptors or in birds that eat other animals or sometimes foreign bodies. Um, you can also see hypoglycemia because they've not eaten for a really long time, and this is more common in birds of prey than parrots. And lastly, CNS infections. If there is a open wound that has been there for quite some time, that can go into the nervous system and cause certain, diseases. Um, Look for the peripheral nervous system. So peripheral nervous system changes are going to be seen how the legs are, if the bird is able to perch or not, if the bird is standing well or not, is there curling of the toes, is it sitting on its hocks, and are these lesions seen bilaterally or just on one side? And then you want to think of your differentials. Is this because of trauma? Is this because of swelling affecting the nerves because of, post trauma, there's going to be a lot of edema? Or is this because of heavy metal? Or lastly, because of aspergillosis? Because all of these things can cause, problems like this. Or is it just a fracture that has caused this? Assess the wings. If you've sedated your bird, you want to pull both the wings and leave them and see if they're recoiling at the same time. If they are not recoiling at the same time, if one wing comes in before the other wing, that could mean that there is something happening with the musculature or the joint. See if there is a wing droop. Every time a bird has a wing fracture, the wing is going to go down. You are going to be able to see the bird is not able to pull its wing up. You want to see if that is unilateral or bilateral. And bilateral mostly is because of heavy metal poisoning. Vestibular disease. So birds are not going to show an ocular nystagmus. They're going to show a whole head that's going to go round and round. And this can also be because of other issues. There can be, infections in the sinus. There can be a CNS problem. There can be a viral disease. If you actually look at this video, this bird is actually circling, but you can also see that it is showing a vestibular sign where the head is actually turning to one side. Um, you want to look in raptors, especially, you want to see if there is any sign of lead poisoning. See if the bird has a drunken gait or if the bird just looks like it's not present over there. See if there is a bilateral wing droop or if it's just sitting on its hocks. As I mentioned, pupillary light reflex is going to be really difficult to analyze in birds because they have voluntary control over their pupils. And when you shine a light into one eye, the eyes are just separated by a very thin bone, and that light actually can cross and go to the other eye, and you're not going to be able to look at any consensual changes or not. Um, Here's another video of a bird showing some neurological symptoms. You can see there's a mild tremor of the wings. The bird has a very unsteady gait. It is falling off to one side. And sometimes this can also happen because of lowered oxygen levels or hypoxia. Over here, in the last picture, we're just doing a neurological exam and seeing how the bird is perching or how it's grasping on both its legs. Is the strength of grasping same on both the legs, or is it reduced in one leg, more in the other? Is it not clenching at all? Because if there is a fracture, if you look at a bird's leg, there is very less musculature beyond a certain point. And in that little bit of connective tissue, there's the bone, there's a blood vessel, there are nerves, there's ligaments, there's everything going in that small space. Now, if you break that, there's going to be so much swelling around all of these structures that the nerve capacity and the function of the nerve is going to be very much compromised. So, I'm going to speak a little bit about first aid and what you can do. We are going to see a lot of, cases where you will have to address a problem that is happening immediately. So, how are you going to, if there is bleeding, if there is a bleed like this, suppose a bird has hit something and there is a bleed coming from, a very difficult spot to control. So you want to just observe quickly without handling much because the bird is likely going to be in respiratory distress. Just look for the exact site of bleeding. Use firm pressure and just try and arrest the bleeding. Suppose it's happening on the leg and you've identified it. Just use gauze, apply firm pressure, restrain the bird as safely and as minimally possible, as long as the bird is all right. And apply pressure for at least 5 minutes and see. Most times, if it's a small bleed, it will stop. Suppose it's a very bad, uncontrollable bleed, use adrenaline, but dilute it 1 is to 10,000, soak a gauze or a small earbud with it and apply pressure just at that point. For very minor bleeds, you can use a styptic, you can use Botroclot, just a drop of it and apply pressure. Sedating is really good because the less movement the bird is going to do, the faster you can address a bleed. And luckily, they actually sleep really fast. If it is a feather bleed, you might want to just pull the entire feather right from the base and then apply firm pressure and stop the bleeding. When you've actually successfully stopped the bleeding, if it's from an extremity of a wing or from the leg, you might want to bandage that area and make sure that you have an e-collar on a parrot. Give pain medication because whatever's causing the bleed has caused pain. And it's important you also use medications like ethamsalate or tranexamic acid. The doses are very similar to dogs and cats, but always check about the species you're using it in. And these can be given subcutaneously or intramuscularly. And it is very important that you give fluids to a bird that has lost blood and watch the recovery. See if it's bleeding again, see what else you need to do, and make sure that you're doing those things to make sure the bleeding is not started again, or if the bird is not collapsing because of the blood loss. Um, when then we're just going to talk about dressing materials. So you have wounds that may be very large. If you are cleaning a wound that is very large, it is very important that you warm the substances that you're cleaning with. Suppose I have a bird with a wound like the picture here, and I want to get all the feathers out. I have sedated the bird, but I want to make sure that the normal saline or the distilled water that I'm using to clean this is actually warm enough and I'm not causing hypothermia. Um, you need anesthesia if you want to debride because it's going to be painful and you might lose a bird if you're trying to clean it while it's awake. Cleaning a wound is really, really important. You're going to remove debris, you're going to remove feathers, you're going to allow the skin as well as the connective tissue to heal and meet each other. Once you've cleaned all of the debris out, you can then disinfect it and dress it with povidone iodine, which is diluted, or very, very diluted chlorhexidine. Ointments that you can use, silver sulfadiazine is really good. It is sometimes you might want to use some things with antibiotics, but only when you know what kind of infection you're dealing with. Always use really soft gauze or Q-tips that are very small and gentle. Make sure that you don't scrape while doing this because you have to remember their skin is super, super thin. For very small wounds, you can also use skin glue. Otherwise, you might have to do all of this and then suture. Applying bandages, again, certain areas can be bandaged, certain areas cannot be bandaged. Sometimes you need to leave the wound open and make sure you have an e-collar to prevent any more trauma and mutilation. Birds of prey might need to be hooded, but again, anesthetizing them is better. So, if you have wing trauma, how are you going to approach it? And I'm going to be speaking only about the first aid and the bandaging. So, once you've identified which bone is actually traumatized or which bone there is a fracture in, sometimes it is good not to quickly try and get x-rays taken. It's very beneficial to know how many parts of the bone are broken. It is very beneficial to know what bone is broken. But if you know that this bird is in pain, this bird will probably, not make it if I go ahead and take that x-ray. It is good to just stabilize the bird first. See if there is a bleed, address the bleed. See what bone is broken by just examining the bird if possible. Otherwise, sedate and give analgesics and then do all of this. And then you can x-ray the bird as well. And suppose you just want to reduce the inflammation before approaching or before going into surgery, using a figure of eight bandage is going to be really useful, which is a very, very basic bandage, and it's good to know how it's done. Here's a picture representation of how it is done. It is basically you going around the wing, but making sure that the wings is actually kept in its normal position so that it is and even if they're open, dress the wound and then do this sort of a figure of eight bandage. And if it is a larger bird, it's good to take the entire bandage around the body once or twice just to secure it. it is also important to remember that most likely, if it is a bad fracture, is a complicated fracture, if the bones have not aligned, this is a bird that needs to fly again into the wild, it is important that you go into surgery to make sure that you're fixing that bone right. Figure of eight bandages can be done if you are planning, if it is a bone that is involved in the shoulder or if it is the humerus, you want to make sure that you're not holding it in this bandage for more than 48 hours because you're going to contract all of the musculature and cause irreparable damage in the future. So if it is for surgery, go ahead and bandage it for the first 1 or 2 days where you're giving antibiotics, analgesics, fluid therapy, and then surgery. Um, Here we have a bird in an e-collar already. You can see how we are handling the bird. It's a lot easier for us. This bird is also sedated. There's butorphanol and midazolam already in, and we're dealing with some wing trauma here. Here's another bird that has gotten a bandaging done for wing trauma. You can see that we're using a really soft bandage roll, and this bird is also going to get an e-collar. So leg trauma, very similar approach. You want to make sure your bird is stable before you go ahead, sedate, and then look at the x-rays, see what bone is damaged. If it is the tibiotarsus or any bone under, you can attempt fixing it by just bandaging, but depends on how the fracture is. If you're not able to create contact by just simple traction after sedation, then it's best to proceed with surgery. But if you're just trying to buy time and you want to make sure the bird is not exerting that leg, then go ahead and bandage it. So, depending on the bird size, depending on the fracture, there are multiple ways to stabilize a bird's leg. So, in both these images, you can see that the leg actually has been bandaged. If it is a larger bird above 200 grams or above 150 grams, it is very good to use syringe splints. So, we just use syringes cut up in halves and attach those to make sure that the legs can't move. You have syringes in all sizes, so depending on the bird's leg and bird size, you can use it. Just remember similar bandaging rules that apply to all species. You want the proximal and distal joint immobilized so the bone is stable and allowed to heal. Um, E-collar is a must. If it's a bird that is smaller than 100 grams, you can use just paper tapes and form like a splint using paper tapes. Use paper tapes on the front and the back and just make sure that it is stuck without any feathers, and that can allow bones to heal if it is a small fracture. Again, analgesia is really important. Make sure you've given an analgesic before you start doing this. If you're dealing with pneumatic bones are the humerus as well as the femur. If you have injuries in the pneumatic bones, sometimes when there is hemorrhage, that hemorrhage can go into the air sacs because these bones have connection with the air sacs. Um, in some cases, this can cause aspiration and death of a bird. So, if you're noticing a bird in respiratory distress that has a fracture of the humerus or the femur, it is very important you nebulize, oxygenate, assess what it's like, and then proceed for surgery. You don't want to scare this bird more. You don't want to do things that is going to cause more damage. You want to buy time and make sure that the bird is stable. So, when it comes to severe respiratory distress, I have spoken about it. I just want to talk about it again. What do you do? First thing is you don't handle the bird. You make sure that it is in an oxygen chamber. You can nebulize with multiple medications in birds. Nebulizer is a great, really, really good tool. You're not directly giving the medication to the bird. The bird is just sitting there inhaling all of this medication. Aminophylline is a very good bronchodilator. It's going to prevent all of that constriction that is preventing oxygen from entering. Um, Using budesonide, that is Budecort, is also very helpful. It is a steroid, but if you have a bird in severe respiratory distress, it is going to ease that distress. So all of these can be used. Aminophylline is usually the safest. It is best to go with that. Sedating is going to help if a bird is struggling to breathe. Once you sedate, it's going to calm the bird. It is going to reduce the anxiety for the bird and allow it to breathe better. If it is upper respiratory or lower respiratory, how will you diagnose this? It is good to take radiographs once the bird is stable enough or once you have it on oxygen. If there is air sac pathology that you identify, like in this X-ray, um, you have options of using an air sac cannulation as an emergency procedure. Birds have air sacs, as I mentioned, and the air sac cannula is a direct endotracheal tube, but it is passed into the air sac, usually the caudal thoracic air sac, and that is going to allow the bird to breathe from its air sac and not from its nose as well as its trachea, allowing direct oxygen to enter the air sac. So once you have done everything that you've done, you fixed whatever you could. Now, what do you do until surgery or until recovery? So, on like if you've done a couple of things today, you want to make sure that your bird is being monitored. Is the temperature around the bird good? As I mentioned, using heat mats, using gloves filled with warm water is really going to help recovery because birds can go hypothermic. If there is feather loss, if there's exposed skin, if you have cleaned and you have reduced the temperature of the bird, it's very important you bring it back up. Monitoring the heart rate, you can use a stethoscope or you can use an ECG if the bird is sedated, and you can also use a Doppler monitor to hear the force of the heart as well as the pulse rate. It is good to make sure that the bird's heart rate is in its normal limit. Every species has a different limit, but usually you want it above 200 beats per minute. Monitor respiration. Is the bird breathing lesser or is it tachypnic? Is the bird breathing normally? Is it relaxed or is it struggling to breathe? Are you noticing abdominal movements? Watch for all of these signs. Um, check the weight. Check the weight twice a day. You want to see what the losses are. Check the stool. Doing a cytology at least once every 2, 3 days is going to help you because your medication can alter the microbiota of these species. You want to give probiotics along with it. What about food intake? Is the bird eating food readily or not? Are you noticing any more losses of fluid in the form of capillary bleeding, vomiting or regurgitation, or polyuria? Birds you lose more water through polyuria. Sometimes, if they do have diarrhea and you can recognize it, then fluid loss is seen there as well. What about monitoring blood? It is very good once you have a stable patient to draw a little bit of blood. If you can't do an entire panel, it is very important you at least check the glucose, the PCV, which is really simple to check, and a blood smear. Why a blood smear? Because it's going to help you realize if the white cell count has increased or if you're seeing a drop in the white cell count or if there is some form of anemia. So what about fluids? Fluids are really, 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 really beneficial. You can increase a bird's body temperature by giving it warm fluids. You're going to hydrate it. It is going to feel like all the electrolytes are returning back to its body and it's going to get a lot more active. What can you use? Isotonic fluids are the best, and mostly because you are going to access a subcutaneous route. A Ringer's lactate or normal saline warm is going to be your best option. If you have an IV or an IO access, then you can use a colloid if the PCV is low or if the bird has lost a lot of blood. What about fluid volume? I can give a bird up to 100 ml per kg per day, but I'm not going to give it all of it if it is eating and if there is some form of anemia as well. You can give 20% of the fluid. This is an image of all the dressing stuff that we basically use. It's things that everyone has available everywhere. These are the syringe splints that I was talking about. So IV access or fluid sites, where can I give fluids to these birds? The subcutaneous site is the most accessible, but if a bird has come in an emergency and I want to get more amount of that fluid directly reaching the heart and then reaching all the rest of the body, I'm going to try and put an IV line. Over here, we're trying to put an IV line in the medial metatarsal artery. You can also use other sites like the brachial vein, the ulnar vein, as well as the jugular vein. Over here, I'm just giving this bird subcutaneous fluids. You can see we give subcutaneous fluids in this pocket between the hind leg and the body. There is a small pocket of skin in the inguinal region, which is really easy to access, has very less blood vessels, and you can safely give a large volume of fluid over here. Um, and you can see how my veterinary technician is holding the bird, and that gives me access to give this fluid safely without the bird flying around, without my needle going anywhere. These are some other IV access sites. This is an intraosseous catheter that has gone into the distal ulna. This is another bandaging image, and here we have the veins, the brachial vein, as well as the ulnar vein that you can see. So, coming to hospitalization, you want to make sure that you're hospitalizing your patient in a quiet environment where it does not feel any more stress. Covering the cages is very important. It is important for the bird to feel like there are no predators looking at it. It is also important to use areas where there are no cold drafts coming in or there is not much heat that is coming in, anything which is stable, safe, and constant. This image here is actually an incubator that we use. This is, we just set a temperature and a humidity in it, and I can also nebulize the bird right where it is. It's really safe. We usually cover it so the bird can't see outside and feel safe. This is a enclosure which we use for larger birds. You can see there's enough space for the bird to move around. And also, this is an area, most times we cover up the entire glass so the bird does not feel like it's being looked at. Um, Here is another bird that is actually eating, and this bird will eat only when it is fully covered and no one's looking. So it is very important that we make these animals feel safe. This is another incubator. This bird is sedated and getting some fluids in. Here is a chart that we use for any patient that has been hospitalized. So everyone is knows what medication is going and how many times a day. And once it's done, it's always checked that this is done. And we have everyday notes that we write at the bottom. And it really helps because you at the end of it, you know what all is going. And you also realize that, okay, all of this is going. I don't see much of an improvement. What else do I add? We monitor the weight every day. So hospitalization is the right way to hospitalize exotics and birds is very important because if you do it wrong, you're going to lead to prolonged recovery or sometimes no recovery. Another point I would like to add here is physiotherapy. It's very important that we try to factor that in with birds with trauma. Trying to get them to walk again and fly again is going to be challenging, and it might probably take a very long time. And it is very important you start exercising those parts that have been damaged. So nutrition is also a very, very key factor in making sure that your animals are recovering the right way. So you have to understand that different animals, different birds have different metabolic energy requirements. And again, when you want to get to the details of it, it's very good for you to calculate what your bird needs and what food you're giving if you're matching its metabolic energy requirements. And you also want to make sure that you're giving at least 2 to 3 times of this metabolic energy requirement because the animal is actually sick and its body is demanding a lot more protein, a lot more energy. So this formula can be used where you just use a constant. For parrots is 78 and for any other bird it's 129 into the body weight and to the power 0.75. Um, you also want to understand that most of these birds are not going to start eating on their own because they feel sick and there is also a lot of stress involved and they're not ready to eat. In such cases, you're going to have to start feeding them by sometimes directly or sometimes using a feeding tube. You want to do this to just support their recovery and to prevent any hepatic lipidosis that can set in because of anorexia. Um, it's also important to know how some birds actually eat. This is waterfowl, it's a swan, and it's going to eat only if its food is in water. Sometimes they peck at stuff that is out of water also, but it's very important to know what they enjoy and try to mimic that. So remembering and knowing the kind of species and the diet that they need is very important. Us being in India, we don't have access to a lot of ready-made diets that are available for critical conditions for different species. But you can try and reading about what the bird needs and making a sort of formula by yourself. For parrots, you can use formulas that are readily available by Versillaga. You should remember that if you have a raptor that you've rescued, then that would need a higher protein content, and it is essential to feed this protein content with bone, with feathers, carrion, all of it. You could pulverize it if it's not eating by itself, or you could feed small pieces of it directly into its mouth. Crop feeding parrots is important until they start to eat. It is very important that you safely crop feed. You should use steel tubes only and not rubber tubes because they can bite on the tubes, and that's going to be another procedure for you. So when you use steel tubes, you go all the way from the left to the right and also visualize where the trachea is, where the glottis is, so you avoid that. And apart from that, you see how the crop is filling. Feel for the tube at the crop and then start giving your food. Make sure that the food is always warm, not too hot. You're going to cause a crop burn then, and if it's too cold, you're going to cause crop stasis. Always remember feeding smaller volumes initially, more frequently, and then you can, once you know safely that this bird can eat so much, you can start feeding a lot more. And always feed until the bird starts to eat on its own. Sometimes younger birds will just accept formula readily. Um, this is how we safe feed it. We give it drop by drop, making sure the bird is actually licking the formula and not just pulling in the mouth because that could be an aspiration risk. Yeah, and that's it. If there are any doubts, you can put them in the chat.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for such informative session. It was really helpful. Now I would like to call Priyanka to kindly take over the question answer session.